Piano. I am showing you today how to throw a cylinder on the potter's wheel. So first thing I need to do is to make sure my pedal is down, so the heel of my foot is down on the floor, to make sure that I'm not going to turn on the wheel when I turn it on. Alright, so my pedal, when you work on it, the more you press down on your toes, the faster the wheel goes, and the more you press down your heel to either slow down or stop. So, as recommended, please make sure you are leaned all the way forward, some space on your chair behind you to make sure you're up against the wheel. I'm actually going to be working with about 1.5 pounds of clay. Now, all the clay that we use when throwing needs to be wedged. If you don't know what that means, you need to go back to the wedging videos and the wedging information to make sure you have wedged your clay properly. On the potter's wheel, that's a step you cannot skip. You have to wedge your clay properly in order for it to be workable on the wheel. So I've got my wedged ball of clay. And I'm going to go ahead and hit it in the middle of my wheel and kind of press all the way around to make sure it's truly suctioned to my wheel head. My wheel head is totally clean and totally dry. You can't have any type of moisture on this wheel head when you start off, otherwise the clay is just going to slide right off. Alright, so once it's on there, I go ahead and turn my wheel on to about a medium speed. This is too slow, and this is too fast. The reason why we don't want to go too slow is that you do want the rotation to be fast enough, so whatever you do to the clay, all of it is being done to, not certain areas. So once I get to that medium speed, I'm going to go ahead and gently take my foot off the pedal and move it to the side. You want to make sure your feet are planted to the ground. One should not be on the pedal. Otherwise, when we lean forward, it gets faster, and as we lean back, it gets slower, and that's no good. So, when throwing on the wheel, you always want to make sure you have water on your clay. If your hands start to stick at any time, you've forgotten to add water. My hand should glide across the clay as so. Alright? The first step of throwing on the potter's wheel is to center your clay. So my left hand is actually in my elbow, is in my hip, so when I lean forward, my entire hand is going forward. I need to make sure that I'm moving the clay is not going to be moving me. So that's why I want my entire body connected at all times. And I'm using my body weight, not these bitty muscles that you see here, to center your clay. So left hand pushes in as right hand pushes down. And I need to add more water. My hands are starting to stick. You'll get used to this over time, having to add water constantly. You can always keep your little sponge in the splash pan so you can get water from the splash pan. As I push down, I'm also pushing in. Equal pressure, otherwise it's going to become either a pancake from pushing down too much, or it's going to become too tall or actually come off the wheel if you push in too much. So down with my right, in with my left, and that equal and opposite pressure is what makes a centered pot or centered ball of clay on the wheel. I like to keep my hands as clean as possible, so you'll see me scraping off slip from my hands. That's common. When we throw on the wheel, our hands are always connected. I would never do one thing without the other hand. So that's also something to keep in mind and notice throughout this demonstration that you'll find is that my hands are always connected. My elbows are on my torso or on my knees. If I lift up really quick, the clay becomes off center. So it's also important throughout your entire process of throwing on the wheel that you slowly release pressure when you want to take your hands off your project. Now, how do we know when something's centered? Something is centered, which means it looks like it is sitting on the wheel. There's no dancing or moving around. It's literally sitting. There's no wiggling. And the way I can test is by gliding my finger across the clay. If I get any bumping going on, it means it's not centered yet. So visually you can check, and then also by testing it out with a finger. So my clay is centered. Now, centering may take 20 minutes, a half hour. That's what happens. Okay, please do not move on to the next step until you have mastered centering. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for for failure pretty much, because it's going to be more difficult to do the next steps without this being centered first. Alright? So center your clay first. Second step, drop the hole. Taking some more water. My hands are in the same position, left hand's on the left side. My right hand is on top, but I'm actually going to have my thumbs connected, and then my two fingers, first finger and middle finger, are going to dive down into the clay. It's a very subtle process. You don't have to go straight down right away. I actually create a little divot to make sure my hands are nice and still. And once I find that stillness and that's centered, I start to press down. Now my fingers are starting to stick, so I'm actually going to slowly release, add some water inside that little divot, and then continue diving down into that clay. My whole body is still, my fingers are still. Again, I am in control, the clay is not in control of me. When you get to a certain point, you want to go ahead and lift up and check to see how thick your base is. You never want to go through your pot and hit the wheel head. So before we get to that point, I stopped, and you're going to go ahead and turn off your wheel. Grab your needle tool, and make sure the wheel's off when you're doing this. Press or push down the needle all the way down until it hits the wheel head, and then grab a finger, and wherever your finger, the pad of your finger touches clay, go ahead and gently lift up, and you're going to see there's a space from the needle to where my finger is, and that's the thickness of my base. I recommend actually for beginners to almost do a 1/2 inch. As you start working more on your pot throughout this process, you're going to be pressing down on the base. We don't want you to go too thin, because again, you're going to have to trim later on, and trimming is going to come up in the next few lessons. So it's important that you have enough clay to work with in order to trim. Now as you get good at it, 1/4 inch is what you're going to be looking for, but for now, 1/2 inch is sufficient. So again, turning my wheel back on to medium speed. Now I've got the right thickness already. If you don't have the right thickness, then just bring your hands and keep diving down further into the clay. So once you finish dropping the hole, the third step is going to be to open the hole. Your hands are in the same position. My fingers are going to be kind of gliding on that clay that's in the bottom, and I'm going to gently start to pull towards the meaty part of my left hand. That's going to open up this hole I've already created. Now it's important not to open too wide. If you open the base too wide, the clay itself isn't going to hold itself and it's going to fall apart. You also have the ability, if you have a smaller opening, you have more clay to work with to make something taller. So kind of keep that in mind. Now for a cylinder, the base is nice and flat and the walls are nice at a 90-degree angle. So it's important that when we pull, or when we open our hole, that our fingers go straight across. They don't want to come up in any way. So again, my hands are nice and controlled, and I start to gently pull the clay, or open the clay, towards my left hand. And slowly release. Alright? Now that doesn't have to be some one swift motion. You can try a little bit at a time. At any time on the wheel, nothing is like super quick. Take your time on it, especially in the beginning. If you rush, the clay is going to know, and it's not going to like you for it, and it will break on you. After opening the hole, you're going to go ahead and compress the base. Take a sponge and gently start to press from inside to out, outside to in on your base to make sure it's nice and flat. And you also want to grab any water that's in the bottom. We want a nice flat base no ridges, no high point in the middle. Do the best you can when it comes to compressing your base. Now you're probably wondering, why is she compressing her base? Compressing the base allows all the particles of clay to lay flat on top of each other. You're already manipulating the clay in a way it does not like. It likes to sit and chill for a long period of time. So by stretching it out and doing all these things, it's just not happy, to be honest. So in order to compress the base, it's allowing all those particles to sit, and you're also going to be making sure that there's no S-cracks later on. An S-crack happens when you don't compress the base, and literally a crack that looks like an S will form. You can't get rid of an S-crack when that happens, so it's important to try to prevent that. So I have compressed my base. That is step 4. So step 5 is going to be to pull up the walls. Now this is the fun, cool part of throwing. That's where you see all the crazy potters doing some crazy stuff by pulling up the walls. This step is going to take a long time at first for beginners. If you see master potters on YouTube or wherever else they are, Instagram, you're going to see this big ring come from bottom to top. That's not going to happen for beginners. I want you guys to do more of a gradual pull. So bring some clay from the bottom up towards the top the best you can, and then keep doing that in order to create a more cylindrical and taller vessel. Alright, so pulling up the walls. The word pull is actually a little aggressive in my opinion. I want you to think about more guiding. So you're going to guide the clay from the bottom up towards the top, and making sure that you have equal pressure inside your finger, like between your fingers. So I start from the bottom, I make sure my fingers on the outside are on the wheel head, and then they come towards the edge of the pot. I gently take a little bit of pressure, and as I go up, both hands go up at the same time. You don't want one hand under the other, otherwise you're not going to create a nice straight cylindrical wall. Adding water. Now I like to use a sponge. You don't have to. You can perfectly do this without using a sponge. I just prefer it. Again, elbows are into the body, taking my time, grabbing a little bit of clay, and slowly bringing that clay up towards the top, and then I slowly release. The reason why you want to slowly release is so you don't pinch off the top. A lot of beginners will be like, oh my god, I'm pulling up the walls, and as they go towards the top, they just pinch off. About an inch or two, you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure to slowly release that pressure in order to keep all the clay on the pot. Now I am doing this at about 4 o'clock if you were to look at a clock. I'm working on the right side of the pot. I don't want to work against the rotation, I'm going to be working with the rotation. So it's important that I'm working at about 3 to 4 o'clock, and my hands are over, my body's leaned forward, everything is connected so I don't become off-centered. Yeah. As I get towards the top, I slowly release. Just checking to see the thickness of my walls. Not gonna lie, I have an air pocket or two. I didn't do a good enough job wedging. But with the experience I'm able to push through, but again, it's not the easiest to do. So it's important to wedge. One more pull. Slowly releasing. So if you notice, I said that your walls are supposed to be 90 degrees. Well, in this case, they're kind of tilted in, and that's something I recommend. Science little tip, centrifugal force. You have a mass in the middle, you have something spinning, it's going to want to go out. So I like to throw a little in at first, and then as I start to perfect that cylinder, as I start to pull up the walls, and I like the thickness of the walls, that's when I start to actually fix those walls to become parallel. If you throw a piece and it goes out, you cannot bring it back in later. So it's important to actually do the opposite. Throw a little inward and then fix them later on. The way you throw inward is to make sure your body is leaning in and not out. So it's wherever those hands are positioned, that's what the clay is going to do. I'm going to go ahead and take all the water out of my base. We never want to have water sitting in our pot. Water breaks down clay. That's why I like to throw in cold water. Cold water doesn't break down the clay as fast. Allows me to give a little bit more time working in clay on the wheel. So I have my cylindrical walls. I'm going to fix them so they're nice and parallel. And then I'm going to go ahead and fix the lip to make sure it's nice and even. So I'm actually using my fingers. They're nice and straight. I'm going to start to create a little bit more of a straight wall. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell from looking over it whether or not it is cylindrical. You guys probably have a better view than I do. So I'm going to go ahead and lean back and check it out. Looks pretty good to me. Take all the water out again. You can always compress the base more than once if you feel it's necessary. Now to fix the lip, we want to make sure we have a nice straight lip. Nothing wobbly or wonky going on. So I like to take my finger, again, both hands are connected, and gently drag on top of the lip. You can also use your sponge. I've also learned to use the crease of my fingers. It gives a little bit more of a roundness. Also looks cool. Alright. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead, next step is to cut off the skirt. So you're going to check out this little bit right here towards the bottom of the pot that kind of bows out. That's called the skirt. We want to get rid of that. It's just an easier way later on when we have to trim. It's less clay we have to work with. So I'm using my wooden knife. This is called the blade, or what I call it is the blade of the knife. And this part is what's going to be parallel to my wall. I hold my knife kind of like a pencil. I always make sure my left hand is holding my right hand because I'm about to cut into the clay. I need to make sure I'm really stable. So I use this point to kind of line up and try to figure out a good parallel angle to my pot. Holding my tool nice and tight, I start to create that little ridge and then gently start to press down all the way to the wheel head. To get this skirt off the wheel, I take my needle tool and I drag it underneath the skirt. I turn my wheel off and I cut off that little skirt. So that's this clay is less to trim later. If you have a huge skirt, try to pull up the walls a little bit more. You shouldn't have that much clay coming off your pot when you trim the skirt. That's okay. The one that I trimmed off. Turning my wheel back on. We never touch our pots without the wheel on. We are not machines, most definitely. We are using a machine that makes a cylindrical object, so you never want to touch your pot unless it's on the wheel. Come on. There we go. I like to always kind of fix my walls once I have trimmed off the skirt. You can kind of tell a little bit as to where it was trimmed. So I kind of like to go back, maybe not more of a pull, but just more of a fixing to make sure it's all the same thickness from top to bottom. That's super ideal. If you're ever going to throw in the wheel, you want to make sure that from top to bottom it's all the same thickness. About a 1/4 inch thick is the ideal thickness. Alright, after trimming the skirt and making sure your pot is exactly how you want it, you're going to go ahead and take the wooden knife again. The blade this time is going to be on the wheel head. It's no longer up, it's going to be down. And I hold it in my palm, left hand on top, and I'm going to be dragging it underneath my pot to make a little bit of a ridge. So I drag it on the wheel head first, and then go underneath my pot. It's very slight, but this little ridge is actually going to help you cut off your pot using the wire cutter. So again, making sure everything's exactly how I want it. I'm about to take it off the wheel, which means I won't be able to touch it. I take my wire cutters. Now, I did this a lot back in the day. I would take my wire cutters, I'd be all excited, I'd be like, yeah, I made my cylinder, and then I'd nick it, or I'd hit it or something with the wire cutter, because it likes to dangle. So just be careful, kind of hold it away from your pot. We never want to wrap our fingers in the wire cutter, because it is a wire and tension will cut. So I usually have my pinkies on the ends where the handles are, and then I use my thumbs to make it nice and taut. Now my thumbs are going to drag along the wheel head, and I'm going to pull all the way through. So if it splashes up at me, that's fine. That's why I'm prepared with my smock and my towel. You can also make sure to kind of clean off your wheel head before doing so. So I pull straight through, making sure not to lift up at all. And then I take my sponge, and I actually am just going to put some water on one side of the wheel head. You're going to notice it's going to get to the other side underneath the pot. Oh, that wasn't a very good job. Let's try that again. Underneath the pot, and water comes out on the other side. So it's cut off. It's no longer suctioned. You can't touch it. You can't turn the wheel on. You have committed to the cylinder in front of you. Alright, let's see if it'll come off. So I like to clean my hands. Again, that's why I have my towel. Nice clean hands, because I'm about to touch my pot. And I'm ready with my little board. Now, if I were to pull straight forward on a cylindrical object, I'm going to ruin the wall. So I'm actually going to do little turns towards the end of my wheel head. You have to be a little forceful. You did have this clay suction to a metal material, so it does take a little bit of time. Now, once I have it towards the edge of my wheel, I have my right hand underneath, ready to catch it. And then I place it on my board. Now, once it's on the board, remember the rule, you can't touch your pot unless it's on the wheel head and secured on the wheel head. All these imperfections I'm seeing, all these finger marks and everything, you're going to fix later on after you trim. So please do not touch your pot and try to fix stuff now. You're just going to ruin the form, and when you go back to trim, you're going to realize what happened. Alright, so from there, when you start to clean up, I recommend turning the wheel back on, grab your wooden knife, blade down, and scrape off that clay. It's just easier. Now, if you are planning on throwing more than one cylinder at a sitting, all you have to do is dry off your wheel, put another ball of clay back on, and start again. If you have any questions, let me know. You can email me or respond to the Moodle. Other than that, good luck.